Hey guys, welcome to Noah's YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a tutorial about facial proportions. This tutorial is meant for people who want to learn a little bit more about the ideal facial proportions and also modifications that naturally occur on people's faces. This is particularly interesting if you want to add some details and realism to your portraits, and also if you want to draw character designs with more diverse characters. Certain facial features are related to certain races, and others are related to certain mindsets of personalities those characters might have. So, if you're interested in making your drawings more diverse and more varied, this is the tutorial for you. I'm also going to be making this tutorial based on my knowledge on dentistry, which I had for 6 years, and some knowledge on art. So I'm going to try to mix those worlds to get the best tutorial possible about facial features to you. So we're going to be starting with this female face. The first thing we're going to be learning about the ideal facial proportions, and by ideal I mean the thing that medical teams consider to be the healthiest, because your nose isn't way too developed or underdeveloped, and your muscles are working just fine, and your eyes aren't too apart, so you probably don't have any kind of syndrome or something like that. So the ideal facial proportions should be more or less like this, which is 3 identical pieces high and 3 identical pieces long. This proportion here should be the same as this one. We're going to be noticing that the first third of our face reaches from our hairline to our eyebrows, and the second third goes from our eyebrow until the bottom of our nose, and then the third part from the bottom of our nose until the bottom of our chin. Our face should be more or less like this, vertically wise. In terms of width, we're going to be measuring from this side of the head just above the eyebrow until the eye pupil, here, right in the middle, and then until the other pupil, and then to the other side of the head. Moving on to a man's face, we can see certain things that don't exactly look alike, but these are mainly due to the fact that men have more testosterone, which means their muscles should be a little bit bigger and stronger than women's muscles. And this fact makes their bones grow a little bit more because their muscles are making a lot more tension on their bones, and so the bone must develop a little bit more so it doesn't break that easily. This will make the man's face look a little bit more angular. For example, on the zygomatic bones, it will look a little bit stronger here, and the chin will also suffer a little bit, and maybe you can draw their eyes a little bit smaller, but we should keep our proportions in mind even if we have all these changes. What I mean by this is that men and women end up having the exact same structure in terms of facial proportions. If you look at these grids, you will end up finding that they fit exactly in the same places: their eyebrows, the bottom of their noses, the bottom of their chins, and their hairline. We will also be noticing that we have 5 eyes spacing between one side of the head and the other side of the head. This eye spacing is very important to respect, especially if you're drawing realism, and it means that you will have 1 eye of spacing between each eye, at least, and then you might have 1 eye of distance between the outer part of the eye and the head limit. And as you see here, both men and women have 5 eyes of width on their heads. There is also another difference between men and women, also related to the fact that men have a little bit more testosterone, and that's related to the shoulder length. Men would have their shoulders a lot more apart than women. Comparing to their normal head size, men will have almost a full head size between the limits of their heads and the limits of their shoulders, while women will be tending to have a little bit less, like 2/3 of their heads from the limit of their heads until the limit of their shoulders. But in order to fully understand human anatomy, we must start by looking at babies. Babies have completely different facial proportions. the adult grid won't fit the baby's face at all, because the babies have a special grid just for themselves. Their eyes are exactly in the middle of their faces. They have huge foreheads and very small chins. This is where, for example, manga artists come, because they make facial proportions really babyish in order to bring cuteness to their characters. Something else that babies are also very tricky on doing is their head comparing to their shoulders. We can see that their shoulders end right after their heads, and their head sizes just completely go off comparing to their mothers. So why are babies so tricky comparing to adult people? We can see that babies have a completely different skull from their parents. This happens because babies still haven't developed any kind of muscle, which makes their skull very underdeveloped. This happens because they have no teeth at all, which makes their jaw not work properly, because they're still not able to eat solid food, and when they become more able to eat more kinds of food, their faces will be growing and end up being like an adult. Also, another thing is that the zygomatic bone is very developed in adults and not in children, also because the muscles in their faces still haven't developed anything. So to study other face types, we're going to be looking at how a person will grow and go through teenage, and how that ends up in different results and different face types. So looking at the profile of children, when babies reach the age of 6, they will stop having their face divided in 2 and will have reached the face divided in 3, like we see in adults. When looking at the baby's skull without any teeth, we can see that there is a huge difference between them and the child with all their teeth already inside their mouth. And you can also see that the child's mouth goes down and a little bit forward because of this. This will happen since the child is a baby until the child reaches the age of 10, and then the face growth will start behaving a lot differently. The face will start growing on this precise direction. It can change a little bit according to how we're gonna grow. So it can grow a little bit more like this or like this. So we're gonna see what happens when these different angles will make you grow. If facial growth ends up being very vertical, we will end up having a typical dolichofacial person, which means their face is a little bit longer than a mesiofacial person, which is the ideal of the medical teams. So this will result in a lower nose, as you can see here, and their chins will also end a little bit lower. And if we take off the hair, we can also see that the 5-eye spacing is not working quite well, because there is no one eye spacing between the outer eye and the outer part of the eye. These people may tend to have lips that can't hold their teeth in, because the face is way too long for their skin, and may end up showing a little bit of teeth. And this is also something that used to be very fashionable on ancient people, because they thought that a long face, a long skull would mean that the person was really intelligent and most likely nearer to gods than to a normal human. The dolichofacial counterpart will be the brachyfacial. This face type happens when your head happens to grow a little bit more sideways than vertically. So what happens is that we also have a face a little bit larger than the 5 eyes rule. And I noticed that my women ended up looking a little bit Asian, which is very interesting. Their faces seem to end up looking a little bit rounder than a mesiofacial face type. I didn't really know about this. Also, contrarily to dolichofacials, brachyfacial people have stronger muscles on their faces, so you will end up seeing their bones being a lot stronger, especially in men, but also in women. So they will be a lot stronger than your usual mesiofacial type. Something else about brachyfacials is that it has become fashionable these days to have a slightly brachyfacial face, because it means you're stronger, more muscle, you have an athletic body, and that's what the fashion industry is looking for at this moment. So if you want to have a character that maybe is not so intelligent, but it's really sexy, you should look for a more brachyfacial face type. And if you want to have someone more fragile but a little bit more intelligent, you maybe should look for a character with a dolichofacial face type. Moving on to a side view, we can see that we have our skull divided into face part and the skull part. If you make the skull a little bit bigger, then you will have a smaller face and you will end up with a more babyish look. These are more or less true proportions of a face. Of course, the fashion industry would prefer a little bit bigger skull so that we have a more juvenile look to our characters. Another thing we should keep in mind is that we must draw all the elements of the face after the middle of the facial part, so we don't get stuff very cramped after this line, because it won't look realistic at all. Sideways, there's no big difference between men and women, but there are some differences that are scientifically proven. For example, women have a little bit rounder forehead, and of course, they don't have Adam's apple. And besides that, you can see that there's no huge difference, maybe thinner eyebrows and a little bit more lashes maybe, but it's not a big deal on a skeletal level. Moving on, according to beauty standards in the 80s, we used to have this beauty line that was considered the ideal place for the lips to be positioned. You can test this in real life if you put a finger of yours touching the tip of your nose and your chin, and your lips should only slightly touch your finger. So some people have a very little mandible and it ends up going way backwards on their face. This is a typical feature of Asian people who have very underdeveloped bodies and also very underdeveloped jaws. This is seen as a very babyish feature and it ends up looking really cute on the person's face. To understand why this happens, we must look at an esophageal skull. The teeth that should be positioned right here are a little bit backwards, which will place the upper lip a little bit more forward than the lower lip, and will produce this extra skin here that will be hanging a little bit more, and also your teeth can get a little bit stuck above the lower lip, so these people may end up having those cute little bunny teeth, especially in children. But this doesn't necessarily always happen. Something else that may also happen to the mandible is that it grows a little bit too much and it goes more forward than the upper teeth. This will result in a little bit of a bigger jaw, which will make the beauty line be touched only by the inferior lip. This and the previous case don't necessarily mean that the person is dolichofacial or mesiofacial or brachyfacial. These are things that aren't related especially to vertical growth. These are things that are related to sideways growth. So you can mix these face type with any type of vertical face growth. Although this face type has nothing to do with the person's intelligence or fitness, this will result in characters that look a little bit stronger and more violent maybe, and that tend to use brute force instead of intelligence. But as I said, in real life it has absolutely nothing to do with your intelligence. Another common facial feature is that people may have teeth a little bit bigger than their mandibles, both upper and lower teeth, and this will show especially in African people whose lips are very widely touching the beauty line. This is also a feature that is considered very sexy nowadays, and the fashion industry highly favors models that have this type of face feature. So now for the last face type, we have people whose teeth are a little bit inwards, so their beauty line won't be touching their lips at all. This feature is somehow very popular among Northern Europe princesses, so it's kind of associated with royalty. For example, if you look at Kate Middleton, her face type is more or less like this. So this face type will give you a character that's not so sensual, even though they can have a really pretty face, and they're not so strong. They're more like intellectual or maybe powerful in economical terms. And this is also a feature associated with the elderly. As people age, they used to lose a couple of teeth, and so their mandible will end up being really small. So they will go back to a little bit of a baby face type, except that now they have bigger noses and bigger chins, and their lips won't be supported by anything, so they will tend to go inwards. So old people will tend to have a smaller face than a young person. And keep in mind that you will also have to add little wrinkles here and there, especially on the lips, so that your character will look a little bit older. So this concludes our tutorial for today, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like or subscribe. I'll be posting more tutorial videos once in a while and lots of speed paints. So see you guys!